My interest in addictions medicine started about 5 or 6 years ago, mostly through personal experience of family members. It runs in our family. I've had several family members get in trouble with marijuana, and it led me to do a lot of research and a lot of reading and get involved with several organizations and research groups around the issue of marijuana.
I didn't try a first puff till I was probably, what's his age, 18. It didn't do nothing for me, didn't like it. I knew that he started smoking dope. But it was, I justified it myself by saying, well, it's not a big deal, because he was telling me it's not a big deal. Yeah, it was just one of those things where everybody was doing it, and I didn't like he was doing it, there's no doubt. But at the end of the day, he just made me believe that it wasn't a big deal, right? I'm only doing it once in a while, Dad, it's not a big deal. And then it's progressed from there.
Parents and teachers need to know is that marijuana is addictive. There is no controversy around that at all anymore. The science is unequivocal. Marijuana is addictive, and it's addictive in the same way that every other drug is addictive. There's no question about that. And the rate of addiction for adolescents is higher than it is for adults. For every 6 kids that try marijuana, 1 will become addicted to it. Parents and teachers need to know that.
And the dope today is nothing like the stuff in the past.
I just want to scream at people because marijuana these days is scary. I do know that a lot of the stuff that Tristan was smoking was laced with other things, and that's the scary part.
I've worked with a lot of families where marijuana is the issue. I smoked a lot of dope in the Cheech and Chong days, and that was Acapulco Gold, 3% THC. We could get paralyzed on that. That doesn't even exist in the marketplace today.
Back in the 70s and 80s, it literally could be called grass. It almost was as weak as grass. It was 1 or 2% THC, which is the psychoactive element in marijuana.
And that's going to be running 22, 26 or higher. Shatter will run 93% THC.
Today's marijuana is 5 to 10 times or higher stronger than it was then.
It's one of the most modified products we've ever seen.
I think it's people just uneducated on how bad marijuana really is. When they tell you it's not a big deal.
He started sort of changing, and things kind of started being more of a struggle in terms of the academics and getting him to do the work and all of that kind of stuff.
Some of the things that you're going to notice are a change in habits. You may see a loss of motivation. You may see a loss of interest in schoolwork. You may see a drop in grades. You may see kids pulling out of activities they were previously engaged in.
Right from when he was like 5, it was sports and baseball and basketball. And
I thought he was so in love with sports and enjoyed sport and was always did it with so much passion. But there came a time he was like, I don't want to play hockey anymore. I just felt like inside me, I felt like such a total failure.
We hear that quite often. My kid was an honor roll student. He was on the sports teams. He's no longer that interested in doing that. He's hanging out with a different group of friends now.
The impact or the effects of it are going to be felt down the lane, possibly not necessarily that day or within that month, but it's like giving a kid a loaded gun and the license to go kill.
And with heavy use, those who had started young, there was a 6 to 8 point drop in IQ, which is enough to significantly affect educational achievement and career direction. So we know that's one of the long-term effects among heavy users. It's been shown in other ways in smaller studies, but that study was really a landmark study. Another lifelong problem that can develop is for those who unmask schizophrenia by use of marijuana. Those who have a genetic predisposition or a family history or are prone to it but don't have it, but use marijuana and then develop schizophrenia, who otherwise would not have developed it. That's a lifelong sentence. You don't undo schizophrenia once it's been unmasked, and you have to cope with that for the rest of your life.
It's important to communicate together as a family. It's important to have belief together as a family.
So another important message for parents is it's never too early to talk about marijuana use before that begins to happen, because it's not a harmless drug, especially for young people.
Talk to your kids, find out really what's going on.
The best step is prevention. So that means in elementary school, probably for most kids, to start having that conversation. You know, kids are using as young as 12 and 13 these days. So have the conversation before they get to high school, before they get to grade 7, so they understand, like I said, the perception of harm correlates with decreased use. If they understand that, their parents believe that and pass that on, their teachers pass that on, that does have an impact. Research has been unequivocal about that if the kids perceive it as harmful, it will reduce their use. Once a kid is using, it becomes very challenging, especially if they're using regularly.
Parents got to make hard decisions. And if you find your kids doing drugs, you have to make tough decisions. Very simple. Don't enable them, don't enable them, don't enable them whatsoever. And that's the biggest things with parenting. And that's from lack of education.
One of the key mistakes that parents make, that caregivers make, is very natural. When our kids get sick, we want to help them. And it doesn't work that way in addiction. We can't love them back into sobriety. In the same way we're going to love them back from cancer or love them back from some other illness. We can love them, but we have to love them in a different way. We have to love them armed with the information about addiction and how addiction works and how it affects our beloved kids. We have to have limits about what we're going to tolerate in our homes. We have to arm ourselves with like-minded people who have been through this journey. And we have to get as much support as we can. And one of the important messages, if your kid is in trouble, that you can say to them is, you know, my dear, I'll do everything to support your recovery, and I'll do nothing to support your addiction. And you need to flesh that out and what that means for you. That might mean no marijuana in the home. That may mean you're not welcome in our home if you're using. It's going to mean something different for everybody. But I can tell you that you're going to need support, because it's going to be one of the roughest journeys of your life to see your kid go down that path of addiction.
Dropped them off, gave them a hug. Lynn's crying, my wife. Come back on the ferry. Right away he's calling me. You got to come get me, Dad. You got to come get me. I can't be here. And I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. So I called Jim. And Wes is calling me every 5 minutes. And he's not supposed to have a phone in treatment. Calling Jim. I go, Jim, I got to go back. He goes, don't you go back. I'm telling you right now, Ange. And that's all he kept telling me was trust me. Wes kept calling and calling. Tore my heart out. Like, the first thing you want to do to your son, right? Or your daughter. That was the biggest thing for me. Learning, you know. So it wasn't really my son looking back, right? I didn't understand. I don't know what was going on. Very uneducated as a parent. So that's what Wes went through, which wasn't really Wes, right? The only mistake he made was the first time he tried drugs, because after that he was an addict, right?
www.projectsam, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, Dr. Kevin Sabat. A wonderful site for people to get onto and take a look at. I tell kids to go onto that site and take a look at it.
Families who aren't familiar with the disease of addiction go through hell initially, until they get in contact with somebody, like Little House, for example, or somebody who understands the disease of addiction and can help the family with it.
In 2015, I personally did 81 interventions. The bulk of it out of South Delta. The bulk of it under 30 years of age. The bulk of it related to marijuana and other drugs, right? But marijuana was almost always in there.
The good news is that with treatment, with abstinence-based treatment in particular, the brain is neuroplastic. It will grow back dopamine receptors with abstinence. And that emotional connectivity will come back, and you can retrain your brain to come back to get normal amounts of pleasure from connections with other people, for example, and from food. And so it's there is a positive story to be held here, to be told here, but it requires work.
Illness that impacts a family in some way in our world, heart, liver, lung cancer, they all have a community-based society, the Heart Foundation, the Liver Foundation, the Cancer Foundation, and that's a citizenry of the community who either in their family they have that illness, or they're concerned about they have it themselves or in their family, and the community who's concerned, they can see it coming. To get under the belly of the beast, we need something in which the citizenry of the community, business, industry, labor, families, grandparents, systems, are educated and aware. So thus, this is an example of that. For instance, the Little Houses where we're at. But it's an example of a community-based partnership. And you create not a healing person, you start to create a healing environment. And I think people are ready for it. And that's where we head to.